Hello and welcome to today's webinar focused on client-centric microfinance. Our title today is Demonstrating the Impact of Responsible, Inclusive Microfinance. Clients Tell a Story of Resilience and Growth. We're delighted that so many of you from across the globe have joined us today. We're spanning numerous time zones, which is common now in our new virtual realities. And we appreciate that for many of you, it's early morning or late in the evening, and we very much welcome your participation. And we look forward to an engaged discussion over the next 90 minutes. My name is Laurie Spengler. I am the CEO of Courageous Capital Advisors, and I'm absolutely delighted to serve as the moderator for today's session. My connection to BRAC as our host organization today dates back to 2005. I've had the privilege of working with BRAC since that time and currently serve as senior advisor to BRAC, primarily focused on BRAC's international microfinance activities. For those of you less familiar with BRAC, I encourage you to get to know the organization and to contextualize some of what you'll be hearing in today's conversation. I just wanted to say a few words about BRAC. It was established in 1972 and its microfinance activities commenced in 1974 in Bangladesh. BRAC first launched its microfinance operations outside of Bangladesh in 2002. And currently, BRAC operates microfinance entities in 6 countries in Africa and South Asia, in addition to its operations in Bangladesh. Together, these microfinance entities serve more than 7 million clients in total, and more than 90% of whom are women. Over the several decades of operations, BRAC's vision has remained consistent, working to build a world free from exploitation and discrimination with opportunities for all. Women have always been central to BRAC's work, from microfinance to education to healthcare and more, anchored in the conviction that empowering women leads to massive improvements in the quality of life for all of us. But BRAC is not the subject of the webinar today. Rather, the focus is on the households, communities, and the individuals BRAC and its peer group serve. These households, communities, and individuals are not only the source of sustained motivation for BRAC and its peer group, but they represent the purpose of our collective efforts as an industry and as a community. So why are we having this webinar? Microfinance and discussions around the delivery of responsible financial products and services are not new. The industry is mature, lessons have been learned. There are many robust and vibrant operators across the world that have attained a scale of reach that's quite impressive. And yet, as an industry, we do not always have at our fingertips the kind of information that allows us to know whether our efforts are really making a difference in people's lives. We have information dashboards that summarize clients reached, numbers of loans dispersed, size of loans, performance statistics about those loans, etc. And we also have wonderful, important stories. But we're often missing aggregate information about what difference those loans and the other services we offer have made in people's lives. Have their livelihoods improved? Has the quality of life improved? Have people been able to withstand a local shock by tapping savings? Do clients feel empowered? Do they feel respected? Understanding the answer to these questions directly from clients allows us to determine whether our efforts are making a difference. Understanding the answer to these questions keeps all of us, from operators to investors to donors to regulators to academics, accountable. Understanding the answer to these questions allows us to improve what we're doing to make a more sustained and significant difference in people's lives. The founder of BRAC, Shafazli Hassan Abed, regularly reminded me that BRAC is not a microfinance organization. It's not a social enterprise. It's not a humanitarian organization. It's a learning organization. Engaging directly with our clients is an opportunity for continuous learning and for ensuring that we are adding value in clients' lives. So why are we holding this webinar now? Our specific timing is linked to the launch of BRAC's Impact Report, demonstrating the impact of client-centric microfinance. And you should all have the link, or be receiving it shortly, to the report. And I encourage you to download it when you have an opportunity and to take a look at it. Our timing is also linked to the increasing recognition of the long tail of COVID. While initial efforts appropriately focused on relief, followed by recovery, our efforts now are increasingly focused on much needed rebuild. And we recognize that rebuild will take time. The experience is variable across geographies, and we need to remain committed to being as responsive as possible to meet the real needs of people during the rebuild process. Client voice, client experience, client view is central to our collective ability to respond and meet people's real needs. This has always been true in microfinance, and it's even more relevant in the context of a global pandemic. So what do we hope to cover today? Well, we hope to share BRAC's experience as a way to encourage an industry-wide conversation around learning, insights, and actions that are relevant for all of us. We hope to spotlight the Lean Data Survey tool as part of an overall framework for impact management and client-centric commitment by microfinance operators. We hope to stimulate and engage discussion between and among our featured speakers and with you, the audience. And we hope to leave our session collectively more determined to ensure that client experience, client voice, and client priorities remain the guiding force for what we do and how we do it, from strategy to operations to innovation to decision-making. Whether we're operators, practitioners, investors, donors, regulators, academics, or just supportive stakeholders of microfinance, this is not about what we say we do. It's not even about our intentions or about our commitments. Rather, it's about whether what we do is really making a positive difference in people's lives, and particularly in the lives of poor women in low-income communities around the globe. So how we organize our time together today, we're going to have a few opening remarks from Shamran Abed, who is the Executive Director of BRAC International and Managing Director of BRAC International Holdings BV. Shamran will be followed by Upoma Antara Hussain, who is Senior Manager for Client Impact and Product at BRAC International Microfinance. And Upoma will give us some highlights of the report. And then we will have some remarks from our featured speakers, Sasha Dichter, co-founder of 60 Decibels, Tara Murphy-Ford, Managing Director for Capital and Impact at Global Partnerships, Natalie Ekon Gabala, Regional Director for Western, Central, and Northern Africa at the Mastercard Foundation, and Greg Chen, Member of the Supervisory Board of BRAC International Holdings BV and Policy Lead at CGAP. Our speakers will give a few remarks, and then we'll have some conversation between and among us, but we encourage you all to be posting questions using the Q&A function, and my colleague Sadia will help curate those questions. And after we have an initial discussion amongst ourselves, we'll be turning to your questions for a broader conversation before coming back to the speakers for a last roundup comment. So let's get started. And Shamran, I'd love to invite you to kick us off.
Thank you very much, Laurie. I hope you can hear me well.
Very well.
As we do these days, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. It's great to be part of this webinar and really exciting to see the amazing response and all of the people who are participating. Greetings from Nairobi. Laurie, you mentioned that the founder of BRAC had said that BRAC is not a microfinance organization or a social enterprise, but a learning organization, right? And you know, the way we look at development at BRAC is through a holistic lens. So we do work across multiple sectors. We do work in multiple ways, from our sort of donor-funded programming to social enterprise type work and microfinance. But microfinance forms a very critical element of BRAC's work, and it is the base on which we build a lot of our other interventions as well. But having said that, it is also something that we have always felt and believed deep in our hearts is very impactful work. So you know, even through all of the questions around impact of microfinance through the last decade or decade and a bit, we have always felt very strongly that microfinance remains extremely impactful. Poor people, and especially the poor women that we target and that we serve, require financial services. And we have always believed that if you do it responsibly, you can have impact on their lives, on the lives and on their families and on their communities. So that is something we've always believed. And we've always felt that this work is extremely impactful. But a few years ago, we really started questioning ourselves: how do we more systematically, gather client voices and gather impact data, and what would be ways to do it which are sort of easier, simpler, more cost-effective, but ultimately gives us the kind of information we need to realize whether our work really is impactful, and also give us ways to look at how we improve our offering, our products, our services, our outreach. Are we really reaching the clients that we want to reach? Are we giving them the products and services that they need? And how do we improve over time? And when we decided to do that, we did a number of things to try to improve our social performance management. But one of the things that we did, which has been very exciting, have been the lean data surveys. And we started doing them a couple of years ago. We decided we're going to do these surveys in all of our countries of operations, Bangladesh, and all of the countries of BRAC International. It's been a really tremendous experience for us to get these lean data surveys done and to see the results, and now to have results over a couple of years. And I'm not going to talk about the results, I'll leave that to Upama, but just to say that, it's been, we've gotten a lot more out of it now, having done them for a couple of years than even what we went in thinking we would get out of them. So we went in thinking we were going to track the impact of our work, but what we ended up seeing is this information, these results, and the data that we're getting out of these surveys actually is helping us think about where we need to do more, where we need to invest to plug the gaps. Are we really reaching our client outreach targets? How do we do better on that? Where are there gaps in terms of products? Where do we need to improve our services? And that's been really tremendous. So, as you said, the objective of today's webinar is really not to say to everyone that we've done these surveys and look, BRAC is doing such a tremendous job on client impact. We are very proud of the work that we're doing. But of course, there are still a lot of areas where we need to improve. As an example, I would say that in certain markets, our poverty outreach isn't where we want it to be, and we need to be more deliberate in our targeting of poor clients, especially poor women. And those are things we want to be honest about and say, look, we are tracking, and we have a way to track it now, and we have a way to then have a conversation with our country colleagues about how we can be more deliberate about the way we target poor clients. So those are the conversations we can have now as a result of having these lean data surveys. So again, the point is not to highlight and highlight our results, but just to share with the industry, especially with our peers, but also with investors and regulators and supporters and funders of microfinance, our experience with lean data, and just to say honestly what we've gained out of it. Happy to answer questions about how it's gone, but really just to say that this has been a really great experience for us to go through this journey with Sasha and 60 Decibels, and we hope that more of our peers would start doing systematic impact data collection and hearing client voices in a way that is easy, and it gives us a lot and has given us a lot. So I'll just stop here for now, and happy to come back and answer questions. Thank you very much.
That's super. Thank you so much, Shamran. And I know you'll be with us through the webinar, so we'll have lots of times for Q&A. But a great beginning of our conversation, and really appreciate you emphasizing that BRAC sharing is a way to stimulate our conversation at an industry level, and really appreciate your highlighting this notion of allowing us to have open conversations. And sometimes I think in the industry, we look at operators like BRAC who've been around for decades doing this work, and we wonder, well, are we going to learn something here? And as you just highlighted with a few examples, you learned a lot, both in terms of accountability, but also where you want to then be focusing effort, energy, investment, and even location of activities. So thank you. So that's a perfect transition. Upoma, let me invite you. I know there's a lot in the report and we're not going to go through all of it, but you're going to just give us a few of the nuggets, the takeaways that hopefully will whet people's appetite to download the report and read it all together. So Upoma, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Dori. Thanks everyone for joining. It is really encouraging to see so many of you joining. And it is an absolute pleasure and honor for me to present on behalf of BRAC Microfinance family, our first impact report demonstrating the impact of client-centric microfinance. And as Lori mentioned, the report is online. You are welcome and encouraged to read it in detail. But for today's discussion, I will highlight a few key points from this report. And they are, we will look at how can we be truly client-centric. So we will talk about our approach, BRAC's approach, and our intentionality in remaining close to our clients and constantly listening to them, learning from them. And we will also go through what are the learnings, what are the results we are seeing, that the outcomes that our clients are experiencing as a result of our work. And we will finally look at how are we using these learnings? What are the ways we are feeding them into our strategy, our operations, our innovations in a way that creates more value for our clients. So if we go to the next slide, in the first slide, we will talk about how do we practice client centricity? And client centricity, as Shaman mentioned and Lori mentioned, it's not new to BRAC. Learning from and with the people whose lives we are impacting have been core to our existence. But our approach to client centricity stems from our microfinance mission. And in order for us to hold ourselves accountable to this mission, we have put strong systems and practices now in place. In all of our endeavors, we are implementing universal standards for social performance management and client protection principles. This provides us a consistent means for tracking and monitoring whether we have the right practices and policies and systems that will enable us to create value for our clients. And we are also using a human-centered design approach to ensure that our clients have a say in the development or review of our current products or new services channels that we are offering. Also, in pursuit of this mission, we intentionally focus on outreach to women living in poverty, living in rural and hard-to-reach areas. So we are not only measuring our outreach in terms of who we want to reach, but we are also setting targets and putting strategies in place to reach the kind of people with the services that they need. Now, we know that reaching the target outreach goal or having the right practices in place does not automatically guarantee a greater positive impact for our clients. So how do we know that we are creating self-employment opportunities, building financial resilience, or empowering women economically, as is our mission? How do we know we are achieving our mission? The answer was simple. We asked our clients. In the past 2 years, we have heard from over 5,000 clients across the 7 countries where we operate. And we partnered with 60 Decibels, Sasha will speak today, and conducted Lean Data Service, which is a mobile-based client surveying methodology. And this really provides us a very simple, light touch mean for regularly listening to our clients and generating actionable insights. These surveys told us who our clients are, what their experience have been with our products and services, and more importantly, what impact are they experiencing in their lives as a result of our work. So combined with social performance and client protection work, these surveys really allow us to learn directly from our clients, address the challenges, and continuously keep improving on clients' outcomes and impact. Go to the next slide. Now, what results are we seeing from doing these surveys? It has been incredibly encouraging to hear from our clients as they shared how their lives have changed as a result of working with us. And as an example, I have some of the results from the survey we did in Tanzania with the clients from BRAC Tanzania last year. And we see that our clients are experiencing some tangible changes in their household economies. For example, their earnings have increased, their ability to save have increased, and their ability to cope with financial shocks, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, has improved. And COVID-19, it's not the only shock in our clients' lives. Our clients and communities regularly deal financial shocks. And these results have showed us that our services strengthen their inherent resilience and really prepare them to be better prepared for the next crises to come. But there are also intangible impacts. Our clients feel that their lives have improved and they feel that they are more empowered in their households. And it is important for us to honor and acknowledge their own perception to their life and their empowerment. So if you go to the next slide. Yeah, so this slide we will talk about, it's last but perhaps the most important question: how are we using these insights? And Sharon Bhai mentioned a few of this already. When we first conducted the first sets of Lean Data surveys in 2019, it really gave us a baseline for where we are, what targets we want to set, and where are our gaps, what kind of strategies do we put in place to achieve those targets. Now, we have done these surveys for 2 years in a row and have a lot of learnings. For example, when we first looked at our poverty outreach data compared to national poverty rates, we learned that we have more room to increase our outreach among people living in poverty in almost every country, some countries more, some countries less. But we also saw that in countries where BRAC is reaching more people living in poverty, the perceived impact is also higher for our clients. This really speaks to the strength of inclusive finance and provides a greater motivation for us to deepen our penetration among more underserved population. This has really prompted us to develop our poverty outreach framework to help us intentionally and deliberately increase outreach in lower income segments. We have also used these surveys to improve our customer service, really understanding what are their pain points that clients are experiencing with our existing services, and how we strengthen our complaint mechanism and other services to address those. But also, it has given us insights into how to bring innovation in our services. What do our clients value in the existing services? What do they want to prefer continuing? What they want to change? So when we are developing pilots for new products or new channels, new services, these insights are very helpful to even design the pilots that we are doing right now. So that's the end of my presentation of data today. If you go to the next slides, we have a few quotes here. We have really, really loved learning and hearing from our clients, and I would encourage all of you to go through the report. Hopefully you will learn and also enjoy the report as much as we loved hearing from them. I'll hand over to you, Laurie. Thank you.
Great. Upama, thank you so much. That was absolutely terrific. And the kind of deep satisfaction you derive and the BRAC team derived from hearing directly from clients really came through in what you shared and how you shared it. So thank you for that. And I think what's really helpful for the audience before they've had the chance to read the report, Upama, is the contextualization, as you talked about the survey as part of BRAC's overall framework on impact in the context of social performance, client protection, others. Your reference that it's a light touch tool and some suggestions of efficiency. And I think in the Q&A, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. I think that's really helpful. And then most importantly, I loved how you categorize the results. There's a set of tangible results, but also those intangible results on empowerment and how valuable that is to your own understanding and insights and reflections. And then most importantly, how do you use them? The actionable insights. And maybe again in Q&A, we can talk about a couple of the examples I think you suggested on the pilot innovation on new products. And maybe we can kind of tease some of those out when we get into the Q&A. But thank you for terrific framing. And hopefully that motivated everyone to download the report and read it from cover to cover. It is a great read, I have to say as well. I'll endorse that. So I'd like to shift now to our speakers who are going to kick us off on our panel. And Sasha, I'm going to first come to you. And I think, Sasha, to give you some opening remarks and your thoughts, but if you could touch on two things in particular. So lean data as a tool methodology has been referenced several times. And maybe for the audience, just level set what it is and what it isn't, without going into all of the details, but just as a contextualization of framing for folks. And then maybe also, Sasha, if you could put that into the broader context of the trends you're seeing in impact management. So over to you, Sasha.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And it's a real pleasure to be here. And we love working with BRAC and BRAC International. I will also underline the learning organization first and foremost. Of all the clients we work with, BRAC really stands out in the extent to which it has integrated the data into daily management practices, into annual targets and goals. And that's music to our ears. To answer the questions you posed, Lori, what 60 Decibels is trying to do is make it easy to get this client level data. Again, referring back to what Upoma said, to paraphrase, I heard her say, we know we're implementing the right practices, but how do we know that they're actually creating the results that we want? Well, the answer is simple. We actually talk to the clients themselves. But to Lori's point, it's always felt in our mind, too heavy and too much of a lift to actually get this data in a systemic and regular fashion. And so the way that we have done that is we focus on mobile-based surveys. We have teams of people in all of the geographies in which BRAC operates. We actually have teams in 55 countries who speak 125 languages, and they are trained to have these kinds of conversations that can lift up this really powerful, both quantitative and qualitative data. A typical conversation with a client will last about 15 or 20 minutes. We work very closely with the BRAC team to really sort of squeeze in and condense, if you will, exactly the most important themes that are that they really want to understand with respect to their impact framework. And that process, is always fun, but also challenging. To make it really concrete, we end up with about a 45 to 50 question survey, but there's always a moment when we're sort of sitting there with 70 or more questions and trying to figure out what we can let go. But it's really important for us from a client experience perspective that the call be short and focused to really respect their time and get the best quality content out of them. And so what excites me the most about this report, in addition to sort of the breadth of the data, is being able to show concretely at a client level what is happening for BRAC and how that compares to benchmarks that we're seeing of other microfinance providers that we're working with. Ultimately, we all want really high quality data, but I think beyond that, we can only make sense of that data if we can put it into context of what good performance is and what good performance is at a client level. So, Lori, to answer your question on kind of trends that I'm seeing, I think increasingly what I'm seeing is a sector that's moving beyond focusing on practices to ask the question of, if we implement those practices, how do we make sure that they're landing in the way that we hope that they will? And I think that is overall the expectation. And I think overall also, certainly another trend that we saw, which is surprising, was in the context of COVID, that we've collectively had no choice but to adapt. In all our methods in terms of how we serve clients. Obviously, there's a lot more digitization going on, but also in terms of the data that we're collecting. And I think we saw through this work with BRAC, through the work we did globally with, we worked in 32 countries getting data around month-to-month impacts of COVID. And I think there's a lot more comfort with mobile-based data collection as well, as people saw what it could get them in this context and gave them tools really to react. So that's really the direction that we hope we're going. One of the things we're happy to share also is this year, and working with BRAC and working with others of our partners, we're actually launching a financial inclusion index, which is designed to really do large-scale standardized customer outcomes for at least 100 microfinance organizations. So this kind of comparative data that you see in the BRAC report, we really feel like it should be easy for everyone to get exactly that kind of data. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do to make that more accessible and again, larger scale and more visible. So again, couldn't underline more what a pleasure it is to work with the BRAC team, and obviously looking forward to our discussion.
Thanks so much, Sasha. That's terrific. Can you just also help us understand you've built an efficiency as you've described, but with your on the ground resources, your methodology, how you've honed it. Say a little bit about the throughput time. So from commencement to results, just give us just a feel. I know it varies, I suspect, a little bit whether it's your first time around or the next time.
Yeah, no, from the first phone call to all the results being shared is 8 to 12 weeks. And then obviously we can work through that more, but it is meant to really be, and again, the data collection itself is going to take 2 to 3 weeks, give or take. So we're starting to get those results coming in really in real time, and then it's a process of synthesis and analysis. But I think that's really, it is essential, and I appreciate you underlying that. We're trying to have this data move at the speed at which these organizations are moving, and to get the data in quickly so you can incorporate it, so you can think about it, so you can use it. I mean, at the end of the day, we throw around a lot of terms, including the term impact management, and that sounds elusive, but this is what this demonstrates, right? We're gathering data from customers, explaining to us their experience of impact, and that data is being used in a very concrete operational managerial way to adjust products, services, how BRAC goes to market. To me, that is the full definition of it. And so I think we need to demystify this a little bit. And the data is the first step, right? If the data doesn't get used in that way, then it's not really that useful. And we can really see that this example is what it means to use that data.
I think that's exactly right. Management, to manage is an action. And it's not looking in the rearview mirror, it's looking ahead. And so you're so right. That throughput time, I did want to tease it out, because I think a lot of times the challenge in the impact investing field more broadly has been, oh my goodness, how do we actually get our hands on the information that will inform decision making? And I think what you have shown is you're able to do it with light touch, efficiency, and with real throughput time that remains relevant for clients' lives. So thank you for that. That's super. We're going to come back to you on the Q&A, Sasha, but I'm going to turn to Natalie now. And Natalie, from a donor's point of view, and given some of your priorities in economic empowerment, gender, and youth, share with us a little bit what you're seeing. And I think most importantly for the audience, why are the results coming out of a report like this? Why are they of interest to you? Why are they useful for you as a donor?
Thank you, Lori. And like the other panelists, really pleased to be here today and to participate on the launch of this report. As you know, Mastercard Foundation launched the Young Africa Work Strategy in 2018, and the strategy seeks to unlock work opportunities, dignify and fulfilling work opportunities for 30 million Africans by 2030, 70% being young women. So as we were starting to implement this strategy that is anchored around entrepreneurship, access to finance, access to the digital economy, the pandemic happened. And when the pandemic happened, we had to stop and start, listening to the young people in the different and government stakeholder, private sector, public sector, and learn how we needed to adjust. And 3 of the key learnings were, the first one was that the baseline has shifted. Some people that were falling back into poverty. A lot of the target of the population that we were seeking to support were actually falling back into poverty. So they needed to reach a certain level of sustainability, even being empowered, which will be the next level. So focusing on that was important. We also learned that access to finance remain crucial. But in addition to access to finance, the young people were looking also at non-financial service support. So in addition to finance, how can they shift their activities, financial literacy, how can they save, how can they can adjust to the pandemic was becoming critical in the conversation. The third element that we learned, and that's really is about mindset shift, was that we didn't know much about the pandemic. No one was able to predict what will happen in the next 3 months. And when you think about this, then it means flexibility, agility. And this is where the work that BRAC is doing is really important, is that the only way to be flexible, agile, is really to listen and to learn. And this, for me, this is the key lessons of all these exercises: the ability to really listen to the customer, adjust product and service to their needs, but really understand, because the understanding of their needs is for us the only way to be able to design programs that will be impactful and that will be able to lift the barrier that we're seeking to lift. So really, really interested by this work and the lessons that is coming from this report, and really a call, I hope, that many other financial institutions that are becoming so crucial, and especially microfinance institutions, becoming even more crucial in a post-pandemic context, can also join those and adopt those type of methodology, impact measurement.
Natalie, thank you so much. They're really, really powerful and so helpful. And as you say, a really grounded reminder about the overall relevance of the products and services that the microfinance community can provide and is providing now. And of course, as we navigate through the recovery of COVID, I really appreciated you teasing out the point about baseline, and in your own work, your discovery and looking at baseline and what's happened. Similarly with what Upoma shared, BRAC doing a baseline and then being able to look at results vis-a-vis that baseline, so helpful, so important to have. And then I loved your use of the words flexibility and agility. And even as we are large operating entities, we must remain agile and flexible if we are to respond to people's real needs. So thank you for those points of emphasis, really helpful. And we'll come back to you also in the Q&A. So next I'd like to turn to Tara, wearing the investor hat, and a similar question to Natalie, Tara, just to kick us off, and just sort of why this work is so relevant for you from an investor's perspective. I know Global Partnerships has been such a leader in thinking about pricing for impact and how it really informs your priorities, and also how you think about being a member of the broader investor community in looking at results such as the ones we've seen from the report.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lori. And we'll echo the other panelists' words in saying that it's an honor to be here and to be able to share our learnings. It's been a wonderful journey to be on with the BRAC team and with 60 Decibels. Global Partnerships is an impact-first fund manager dedicated to expanding opportunity for people living in poverty. So this data really sits at the heart of our mission, and would echo again what the other panelists and speakers have said around accountability. I think that our learnings, we've been conducting lean data in our portfolio with social enterprise partners like BRAC over the past 3 years. And during that time, we've heard from over 5,300 clients across 10 countries, across 3 continents. And the data has really enabled us to move beyond the conversation of intentions and the measurement of outputs into really driving towards discussions of outcomes. Are we reaching who we aim to serve, and are their lives improving? Not only has that helped us drive to stronger decision-making as an investor that really centers on what matters most at the end of the day, but it's also helped us align with other social enterprises. So who we're investing in, not only are they interested in that data, but are they using that data in ways that are informing their product and service design? It's begged us internally to say, how do we design our products and services to better center on the client? So again, not just what we invest in and why, but how we invest, what terms we invest on. If we truly value the impact the way that we say we value the impact as an industry, then that should be brought into the type of capital, the forms of products that we offer social enterprises like BRAC that are striving to reach more and to do better. And it's also helped us align with our upstream stakeholders. So as a fund manager, we manage capital from asset owners. Those asset owners care deeply about the impact that's being enabled through the portfolio. And we've been able to speak in concrete terms with them about what we need their capital to do, what we need it to look like in order to drive the deep and inclusive impact that they're hoping to achieve. So it's moved the needle for us tremendously in terms of moving beyond kind of esoteric conversations about what we're hoping to achieve, to move really into a concrete conversation about what are we achieving and how can we do better. So appreciate the ways in which it's created alignment, but also I think as investors, an important kind of shift in where the accountability lies, who we're really aiming to create value for. For us, it's across all our stakeholder groups. right? But most importantly, the clients that we aim to serve. So happy to weigh in more as the conversation continues, but those are our initial reflections.
Great, thanks, Tara. Love your two A's, accountability and alignment, and also your use of the phrase value creation across the board, and specifically value creation for clients. I think that's just so powerful, and as you say, that really is a representation of moving beyond, importantly, outputs, which we need to look at, but into outcomes, but outcomes where there really is value enhancement, value creation. I also appreciate your invitation to focus on not just what we invest in, but how we invest, both in terms of the type of capital and the terms of the capital. And I think I know this is a hot area of discussion within the broader community, but your clarity of what you're solving for and what you're keeping front and center, and that the kind of how should be in furtherance of that ultimate value creation for clients. So I want to come back to that particular point, Tara, because I know Global Partnerships is quite a leader in that regard, and maybe hear a little bit more from you on the capital side. But thank you for that opening framing, super helpful. And Greg, I'm going to turn to you now. I know, Greg, you're wearing two hats. We all wear several hats, but you're wearing two specific hats in this conversation, at least. One is as a board member of BRAC International. And so it's really interesting to understand from a board point of view, how is this information useful to you as a board member, and then also wearing your policy hat at CGAP. So maybe if you'd share some opening thoughts on both fronts.
Yeah, just maybe a broader reflection that I've been sort of close to microfinance or deeply involved since the early 1990s. And this struggle for figuring out impact questions has been with us throughout. And I think of this work now as a very important acceleration of that process for us as an industry. I just speak to that more broadly as someone who's been an observer and closely involved in this industry for some time. I think early on we had the broader narratives about the benefits of microfinance, and then we fell into some crises, and then we had a large debate around the RCTs. I think this kind of lean data work that we're starting to see come out is a major addition to our building a stronger industry. I would just say that sort of overall over close to more than 20 years of looking at this business. Maybe just first as a supervisory board member, I saw some of the early data in the first round, and I said, wow, that's nice, but I frankly, I didn't think about it too much. But when subsequent data came out and was presented to us, sort of the light bulb went off. I mean, both we could compare across the countries that we're involved with against some baseline, but then we could start to see it over time. And that to me was a very powerful sort of insight. It also, for a board member, it sort of answers a question that's on your mind, but which would be an enormous investment otherwise to try and answer. But here it is being sort of presented to you in a concise, distilled, and importantly, efficient or lean way. And in some sense, it does our job for us as a supervisory board member, because it points to where your weaknesses are, but it asks the questions in ways that are actionable. So it's not a hypothetical question about whether people are doing better often. It is often much more framed in a way where, okay, I know I need to do something about it, or country X is trailing our peer group, or country X slipped from where it was 2 years ago. I mean, that's really actionable thing that really points to where, as a supervisory board, you should be putting your attention. But more importantly, management sees it too, and they're probably already on it if things are working well. So I just say, from a supervisory board perspective, that's been really helpful, and I would endorse sort of continuing this across BRAC. From sort of a policy perspective, I mean, I go back and I think about the moment that we're in, and I'm into a number of discussions about resilience of both clients and the microfinance industry. And I think some of what we're seeing here comes out of BRAC's own crises in Bangladesh. And we have a blog even up on the CGAP site that went up this week from Microsave, which talks about the resilience of Bangladeshi MFIs. And one of the key piece to that, to me, is being close to the clients. And I would say, as a policy person, as a regulator, as anybody looking at an industry, I would bet that the institutions that are going to come through COVID more intact, stronger, are those that are close to their clients. I mean, I think if there's something we've learned over crises to crises over many years, it's really being close. And to me, this tool that we're seeing here is a way to put that into action. It's something that I think any stakeholder in management, investor on the policy side would want to see in any strong microfinance institution. So I suspect the institutions that have already embraced, and many others have embraced these practices, it's not just BRAC, they are going to come through the crisis in much better shape than some of the others. So I think about it in those terms, Lori.
Greg,
thanks.
Super helpful. Great opening comments, and really appreciate your reminder about where we have been as an industry, because I alluded to that in my starting point. It is a mature industry in many ways, and you're right, there has been kind of this elusive quest for real-time information that informs or holds us accountable and informs future action. So I appreciate your perspective on that. Board member, that was fantastic, because board member, it's not about receiving the report, it's about what questions that we should be focusing our time, energy, and effort as a challenge to management, and of course in support of management. But the job of a governance body is also to challenge and shine a spotlight on those gaps and those issues. And something like this really gives you that vantage point, as you're saying, in a concise, I loved your reference about a concise, lean, efficient way. And from a policy point of view, I know we have a number of regulators participating in today's webinar, so really appreciate you highlighting that and looking at the resilience, the operational resilience, the financial resilience of the MFI itself, and using this information and making sure you are staying close and very proximate to your clients. And we'll maybe in the examples, we can talk a little bit more about that, about how MFIs, including BRAC, have used this information to navigate through COVID payment holidays, restructurings, a number of tools. You can only do that if you have access to the information and are working closely with your clients. So terrific. Thank you all very, very much. I'm going to have a couple of questions that we're going to open it up to the panel, and then I know Q&A, the window has been filling up, and Sadia, I'm going to turn to you in just a couple of minutes, but I wanted to kick off. You all spoke to the importance, the relevance, the utility of the broader impact management approach, and then the specificity and efficiency of the lean data methodology and tool. But what are some of the challenges? Let's get those on the table here, both for operators and for those supporting the operators. We know it's terrific. We want to do more of it. Lots of people are engaged in a client-centric commitment, but what is holding folks back? What are some of the challenges? Sasha, I'm going to kick off with you as an implementing partner working with the operators, and I'm going to turn to Upoma as an operator, and then Tara as an investor. Just kind of quick, just to get on the table some of the real challenges here in doing more of this.
Hard questions first. I mean, I think systematically, Lori, there is a high degree of comfort with the way we are doing things. I think that sort of structurally as an industry, that is a challenge. We need to, even, and Greg, I appreciate your honesty to say, we saw the data the first time, it seemed nice. It took a time series. It's kind of sitting with us. It took us seeing how the team was using it for it to really penetrate. And I think that's true. So, I think it is the easiest thing to do is continue going the way we have been, which I would describe as we're collecting a lot of data. And it can be easy to lose track of the fact that the data that we want the most might not be included in the data that we're regularly collecting as an industry. And so I think to me, the biggest challenge is a mindset shift and kind of to ask our questions. I think collectively we need to articulate and continue to demonstrate, and this is where BRAC is really showing its leadership, demonstrate how the data is utilized. And not simply for sharing, but actually utilized operationally. Because I think collectively, all of us need to own the fact that we have very poorly branded impact measurement as kind of a cost that needs to be kind of borne through with gritted teeth, rather than a way to deliver on our mission. And somehow we have to acknowledge and be willing to say out loud, like, that is kind of how it feels. And it shouldn't. That's the problem, actually. And so our job as a partner is to actually deliver on the promise of making it as easy as possible and making the data as useful as possible. But I think collectively we need to shift to a different spot and ask ourselves, like, how are we operating? And I think that's the experience. And I don't want to put words into Upoma's mouth, but I think there's this experience we see with BRAC and with other partners of like, now that we have this data, like, how did we not have this data before? It's kind of crazy to think that we've got all these clients, we're interacting with them every day, and we haven't found a way to just integrate this into how we approach our conversation with them. But that's not the normal starting point. And so I think fundamentally, that's a little bit of a reckoning we need to do. We feel like our piece of that is to make it as easy as possible, as affordable as possible, as benchmarked as possible. So our job is to like drive that utility. But there is a bit of a broader conversation of like, let's get a little bit uncomfortable that where we are is the end point, rather than we've made a lot of progress in a lot of areas. What we're doing is just another leg to that stool. But we do think it's an essential leg, whether through us or otherwise, which is having that consistent client voice.
I think that it's so great, Sasha, because from my vantage point, I completely agree with you about the mind shift. Because oftentimes this is seen as a burden, and it got done through the prism of audit or compliance, as opposed to the use case. Let's use this information. I also share your view as how is it possible we didn't have access to this for as long as we've been at microfinance? So I think it's a very honest acknowledgement. The good news is we have abilities now to gather it and to use it, but we need much more of that. So thanks for your candor there. Upoma, over to you as an operator. What do you think some of the challenges are?
Yeah, no, thanks, Laurie. I think as an operator, this was actually quite helpful and really welcoming at the time that we were introduced to 60 decibels actually by Tara at GP. But it really gives us this what I said before, light touch, simple way of knowing our clients and being able to more systematically gather client data. I won't say challenge, but a few things that we have to think through sometimes is keeping it lean in a way that it still gives us enough information and actionable information across the portfolios that we work for. So there is always this balance, like between what information is good to know versus what information is need to know, and then making the survey tool also applicable for all the 7 countries where we work, given that the contexts and realities benchmarks are very different in the markets where we operate. So that's one of the things that we have to think through. I think working for BRAC is wonderful because everyone is bought into the impact goal. It really is core to our existence. So it has been quite also encouraging to see how our CEOs and the country teams, our social performance managers to all of our operations have taken this information really welcoming. But it really needs, like, we do really have to drive that, how we are, not just sitting in our head offices, but also at the branch offices using this information. And that is, I wouldn't say challenge, but that is also something that we have to really work on, think about, make frameworks for. So yeah.
Great. Well, you have to be deliberate about it. I mean, it's a really good point, Upoma, and that proximity is really in country at the operational level. And so integrating and being intentional about it, a really good reminder. I appreciated your challenges about, and Sasha, you alluded to this, that sometimes you start with 70, 75, you got to whittle it down to 45, 50 questions to be respectful of the client, the respondent to the survey. And then, so how do you do that, Upoma, to make sure that it's the must-haves, not only just the nice-to-haves? That's a really good reminder of a challenge. I also like your teasing out of the comparability. And I know, Sasha, you're doing this to have comparable information across lots of geographies, and circumstance and context does matter. At the same time, we do want to be more systematic and have that open, transparent sharing of information. So I think those are 2 really good ones to tease out, Upoma. Thank you. Tara, I wanted to ask you from an investor point of view, and I know GP has also been both a champion of this work and you've been a funder of some of this work. And so how do you think about the challenges of doing more of this type of undertaking?
I think that Sasha was very spot on in the commentary on mindset shift and economics. And as we've moved through this work, there is an aspect of kind of the value for money hitting a tipping point, where stakeholders need to see the value, get bought in on the value, and then say, okay, what is that? How do I value that economically within my operating model? And so a couple comments on that. I think for us, first and foremost, we knew that lean data needed to create value for those that are closest to the clients first.
Tara, I think we're having a little trouble with your microphone. Are other people having a little trouble with Tara's microphone? Yeah. So something happened.
I thought it was just me. That was surreal. Yes.
Yeah. It just yeah, played a little bit. This is our virtual live event. So you get perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can.
Thank you for your patience.
Yes. No worries.
I will back up just a moment to, I think I was talking about showing up an impact first partnership with our partners.
Yes.
So not just coming in and saying that we will fund this for you to test into the value, but to actually engage in dialogue on what is the value? What is it that you're looking to accomplish? How will this data inform decision making? What are the business questions that are driving the research questions, so that we could really map with an organization, not just, okay, now you're going to have a report with numbers that you can talk about your impact, but how are you going to use it? And so for us, it's been, yes, the showing up with the resource, but to be honest, the resource is only a piece of the challenge. It's really around understanding the disruptive nature of this data, organizations being open to the disruptive nature of this data. And I think what we've witnessed is that, particularly for our social enterprise partners, as they see the results come through, any initial reluctance in terms of operating this as a complement, not a replacement, but a complement to the other impact management work that they're doing, has very quickly diminished. And then I think as we've seen this really pick up and create value for partners, it's been a really valuable conversation to then engage with our investors. To talk about the way in which this is creating value for the end client, the social enterprise, driving better decision-making at global partnerships, and creating value for you as an asset owner. And so then the question becomes, if this is creating shared value, who is investing in the data? And where does that responsibility sit at different points in time? And so, from our perspective, I think the shift in mindset over the 3 years that we've been doing the work, and I think accelerated during COVID, to Sasha's point, any initial reluctance, all of a sudden partners are saying, yeah, I need to get closer to my client, and yeah, I need that data. And all of a sudden, mobile-based methods, if there was any initial reluctance, seemed like the best offering out there. But yeah, we've seen a real acceleration, and I think these questions, and BRAC being a great example of it, Global Partnerships has been doing this with a select set of partners. We can't afford to do it across our portfolio. We've been focusing on partners where we really saw the capacity for them to pick this up and run with it. And BRAC has done that beautifully. And for us to be able to kind of be an initial kind of catalyst of the work with philanthropic funding, but hoping to see that built more into the margin of both operating models and funding structures.
And on that's great, Tara. And on that last point, and maybe we'll dig into it a little bit further, but just, are you seeing also greater recognition among your fellow investors of, if there is an operator like a BRAC who, with a partner like a GP early on, is experimenting, is exploring, has tapped some additional funding to get started, but then it becomes literally part of business as usual, which it really has become for BRAC, as you're saying. Are you, and the value points that you're emphasizing, are you seeing investors beginning to recognize that and incorporating that value into how they look at the investment opportunity of an operator who's using these methodologies?
Yeah, I think that when the data starts to hit a certain critical mass and there's comparability in terms of performance, that we can speak in concrete terms about who is performing strongly and on what dimensions. And if we're sitting at the table saying that we value impact, I do think absolutely impact investors are starting to say, gosh, we've kind of held this organization up as best in class, and we had this perception of what was happening that may not necessarily be happening in the same ways. So I think that investors are certainly seeing value. We'd like to see investors really orient their decision making and incentivize and reward strong performance. I think that's the next phase of work for the investment community. But I would say absolutely there's increased awareness and appreciation of that type of data to drive decision making.
Super. Thanks, Tara. Natalie, I want to turn to you. What is there a piece of information from the report or a category of information that most surprised you when you were looking at the results, and both in what you've seen, but also what you've heard from UPOMA? Was there an area that you thought, wow, I wasn't expecting that?
First of all, I think the piece of the measurement that we felt really interesting, the most difficult to get a measurement around all the intangible measurements, and I think as for us that's very important in terms of well-being, being able to measure the well-being of the young people, or being able to really understand how it's impacting their life. So for those pieces of information were quite interesting. And what was also striking is that even and across the board in any countries, even the economic empowerment of women did not always translate into being empowered to contribute to the decision in the household. So therefore, highlighting again the importance of cultural bias, but also the importance of the need for policy change, etc. So for us, that's something quite interesting also. And especially as we embark into the implementation of our gender strategy, being able to really be careful, that was a critical piece of information.
I think that's really helpful, naturally, and I think you're right that oftentimes we make assumptions. We think that if we can track where the money's going and the kind of products and services that are being delivered, we make certain assumptions about people's well-being and about empowerment. And this is hearing in someone's individual voice whether that really is making a difference. I think those are great shout outs. Sadia, I want to ask you to jump in and see what questions we're getting from the audience, and maybe direct. I've got several others, but let's see what we're getting from the audience, and maybe I would invite you to direct a question or two to our panel.
Sure, thanks, Laurie. I'll kick things off with a question from Mike Warmington from Mercy Corps. How is BRAC using, or how does BRAC plan on using this data to inform strategic or growth decisions? Are we planning on investing more in countries demonstrating more impact or inclusivity over others?
Great, thanks. Shamranbhai, I may direct that one to you.
Yeah, sure. So obviously, we're looking at that data and trying to figure out how we use that for our decision making. So in terms of that specific question from Mike, I would say if certain countries are showing greater impact than other countries, it doesn't necessarily mean that we take all of our resources and put it more in those countries. We want to grow the impact, obviously, further in the countries where we're making impact, but also understanding why we're not making greater impact in the ones where our impact data is not so overwhelmingly positive, where we are, as I said before, if there are certain countries where we're failing to reach, the poor women who are our primary target clients, how do we become more deliberate about putting branches where they are? How do we reach out to them with the products that they need? So it's both. It's both trying to figure out how we do more where we're doing well, but also how we improve where we're not doing so well. And it is really helping us do a lot of that. So, even in the first year when we got the lean data results, one of the first conversations we had with all our country CEOs were, this is your poverty outreach today, and this is what we'd like to see next year when the lean data results come out. So we actually discussed with them and negotiated a target. And that gave us a way to track that over time and see if they met their targets the next time the lean data results came out. So, it really changed the conversation we were having from, sort of financial targets and borrower number targets to, poverty outreach targets, which is what we want to do. So that's just one example of, many things that we could now think about, discuss, look at where we have gaps, look at how we can improve. And so, Mike, yes, it gives us a way to think about where we need to put in more of our resources, but more of our effort as well, in terms of where we need to improve our current services and our outreach.
That's super, Sharonbai, and it really does shift the dashboard, right? What you're saying is, the kind of performance dashboard shifts. You're adding things to it and maybe shifting points of emphasis. I also like your reference to it helped you to formulate some targets. If were areas you wanted to improve, you actually quantified it and said, we're going to go for this, and we would expect the survey data to support whether we have actually delivered on that in the next year. And because these are annual, you actually have a reasonable time period by which to measure the results of your efforts. So I know that's terrific. Thank you for that. Sadia, any other, I know we've got a bunch, so another question from the Q&A window.
Sure. A question from Carmen Velasco, maybe for Upoma or Sasha. How are staff involved in the information gathering process?
Great question. Why don't both we hear from Sasha and Upoma? Maybe Upoma, do you want to kick off, and then Sasha?
Yeah, sure. I can go first. So, like I said in the beginning, that for BRAC, it is light touch in a sense that we are not involved in actual gathering of the data. The phone calls, and Sasha can come in and explain a bit more, but those are handled by 60 decibel staff. For us, the more sort of work is before the survey starts, where we look at the survey question and think about whether these are the questions we need to ask or not, as well as look at our portfolio and think about what is a representative sample of clients that we need to survey, and how do we provide 60 decibels with the contact information of our clients in a way that represents our portfolio in every country, as well as if there are needs for translation and quality checking of the survey tool, we do that. BRAC helps 60 decibels. But now I think, Sasha, you can come in and explain a bit how your staff are involved.
Yeah, exactly. And again, we're always kind of walking this fine line. We want to make it as easy and light touch as possible for our clients. So this is not an additional thing for them to do, but also involve them fully in the content and the process. So there's a high degree of involvement up front. Again, Upama is much better placed than I to talk about sort of the socialization that happens with each of the individual geographies. But what then we need to get is quite simple, actually, just to pull up contact information from a representative sample or the full client base that we pull a representative sample from in each of the geographies. And then it's up to our researchers in each of those geographies to be placing the phone calls directly themselves. And in that data gathering process, BRAC and our other clients are typically involved in letting clients know that the phone call is coming. We don't want phone calls to be a surprise. We want them to have total confidence that this is safe, it's secure, all these sorts of things. So that's an important step to make sure that that communication happens prior to anybody receiving a phone call. But other than that, then our researchers are just placing those calls, and it's actually very light touch for BRAC. And then we'll do the synthesis, et cetera, and that dissemination process starts to happen.
Super. Thanks, Upoma and Sasha. Excellent. Very practical. Gives us a good sense of execution. Sadia, another question from our audience.
Yeah, so staying more with the lean data process, what are your thoughts on the relationship between inclusivity and impact? Are we targeting growth in one over the other, or do they reinforce each other? And this question is for Upoma.
Sorry, Sadia, the question is directed at
Upoma.
Oh, Upoma, please.
Yeah, sorry, Sadia, can you repeat the last bit, please?
Sure. I'm not sure if this is a mic or technical issue. what are your thoughts on the relationship between inclusivity and impact? Will you target growth in one over the other, or do they reinforce each other?
Yeah, no, I think it's the similar question that Chairman Pai answered. For us, impact at scale is what we say is our goal. So we don't want to do work that is not impactful, but we also don't want to do impact at a small scale, right? So impact at scale is something that BRAC it really internalizes, and for us, growth and impact is both important, and that's why this work is so important as well, because it shows us where we can grow more to have larger impact, and I think Shaman Pai already answered that quite well. That it really gives us the opportunity to look at and strategize where should we put our effort and our resources.
Yeah, and what I heard you both saying is that there's a reinforcement of inclusivity and impact. They're positively reinforcing. It's not a trade-off in the way that BRAC's thinking about it. And you're using the information and sharing it quite openly to challenge yourselves to go further on inclusivity, because that deepens your impact. So there's a reinforcing dynamic here, is what I heard Chairman Pai and Upoma, both of you say. I mean, it's a great question, so very much appreciate the question. Excellent. Please.
Laura, I was just going to mention, because this might create an opportunity to spotlight what the relationship between a practitioner and an investor can look like when we have access to this data. Global Partnerships is providing working capital for growth. And it's not just growth for growth's sake, it's growth for impact. And so when we're sitting at the table with Shamran, Upoma, the BRAC team, we're having a conversation about what are your goals in terms of growth. And we're not just talking about borrower counts, we're talking about the depth of your inclusion, not just on poverty, but also on gender and rurality. Right? We're talking about what is your hope in terms of strengthening the value proposition and the impact that's being created at various partners. And to that point around, are we only going to push resources into the strongest performers? Are we going to be providing resources into those that are on a trajectory towards improvement? And what is the type of capital that's needed to reach those objectives? And so that's when we move beyond intentionality into a concrete and measurable practice on, are you meeting your targets, and not just financial targets, but your impact targets as well?
I think that is so powerful, Tara, what you just shared. And I love how you framed it as the relationship. And it is an ongoing relationship between a funder, whether you're a donor or investor, but a funder and the operator. And it should all derive from the ultimate objectives, where hopefully we have that alignment that you talked about in your opening remarks. But then to really get specific about it, you got to make sure that what you're offering and the terms and conditions on which you're offering that actually allow you to achieve those objectives. And then I love that you brought back in your second A, the accountability. And then let's all hold up the mirror at the end and see, are we really delivering what we said we were going to deliver? This product, this service, but these terms and conditions with the enabling capital, which goes, we're kind of dancing a little bit, used at pricing for impact. We're dancing a little bit around that, but pricing and the expectations around pricing, cost of capital, returns, all of that is part and parcel of that relationship conversation as well. Is that fair, Tara?
Yeah, and I think along with pricing, there's also patience. When you have ambitious growth plans, you need to have the runway to be able to deliver on those plans. And so organizations like BRAC, particularly in this moment of the pandemic, where we're seeing large and growing needs only get larger and become more profound, need to have the working capital to grow, to be able to step into that need, but to do so in a way that really is inclusive and creates value, or else we're not building back better, right?
Yeah, well said. Very well said, Tara. Thank you. Super. Sadia, I'm looking at our time. We've got about just a little over 15 minutes left. I do want to give the panelists a chance for a closing comment, but we've got definitely some more time for questions. Anything about examples that people want to hear from, or other areas of inquiry, Sadia, from our Q&A window?
Sure. A question from Stephanie Garcia Van Gool. Can we give examples of action plans implemented due to these surveys at the country level? Perhaps Upoma would be best placed to answer that one.
Great. Yeah, tangible examples. So Upoma, you referenced a few in your opening remarks that maybe give us a better feel for a few of those.
Yeah, no, thanks for that conversation. And really, this whole conversation is about that, right? How are we using it, and using it in a practical way? So for us, the lean data really complements the work that we were doing with universal standards of social performance management and client protection. The way it complements is that in every country where we work, we have a social performance work plan to close any gaps, to improve ourselves every year. And this is part of our annual operations planning, our budgeting, before every year starts. And how lean data helps us is now add on that, really complement setting those targets in our social performance action plan. But also, not a lot of the things that we hear from our clients are new to us. Our staff are going to our clients every day. They know some of this we already know from our regular operations. But what these data and results and hearing directly from clients and seeing their codes does is then it really helps us drive those conversations around change. Like when we go to the country offices and can show concretely, like, this is what a client has said, so we need to work on it, it's really helped us move those conversations and those activities. So for us, it's really going hand in hand, implementing our social performance, but also complementing that with direct client input. Yeah, I'm gonna,
and Upoma, and that's perfect. That's really helpful. And you were reminding us again, this is part of a broader framework, which I think is a really helpful message to be reinforcing in our conversation today. So that's kind of one, and it's part of the social performance. It's within how we think about social performance priorities and objectives. The embeddedness, a point that you made. Chamrampa, you also talked already about the targets, the poverty targets. Upoma, you did mention in your opening remarks about pilots and product innovation. Maybe just one example of where it's stimulated a product innovation, I think might be another additional complement to the examples.
Yeah, great question. So one of the things, last year's, given the COVID situation, that we were trying to understand that our methodology, the microfinance group methodology is very much, you sit in a group, and with the COVID requirements around social distancing, we couldn't do that anymore. So we had to really think about how we can fast track our digital transformation plans. So one of the things we did in our last surveys was to really ask our clients, what do they value in those groups? And if we were to move from a more high touch to a low touch digital way of doing work, what would they value in that? What do they want to see and not? So when we started pilots in Tanzania and Uganda this year. When we did that, those insights around, what do we value about groups and what would we be, worried about using digital, really helped us design the pilots as well. So yeah, that's one of the very, very interesting, I think, example of how we are doing that.
And I think what's great about that example, Upoma, it also informed your prioritization. So you actually moved up on your prioritization list, digitization, and then it specifically helped you shape the pilot. And then hopefully you can get some feedback on the rollout of the pilot. So that's a great example. Thank you for that. Excellent. Sadia, another category of question that we're getting?
Yeah, and so how does BRAC plan on moving with the lean data surveys in the future? Do we plan to integrate the process of collecting clients' feedback internally? Will this be conducted internally with an outcome survey every year? Will we have a dedicated team in each affiliate?
Great question. So operationalization of all of this, how are you going to take it forward and scale it up? So I don't know, Upoma, do you want to speak to that as well? And maybe Shamron Pai? And then I have a follow-up for Greg on that one.
Yes, sure. I can take this one. So for now, we're going to continue to do annual lean data surveys. And when we're committed to doing that, we're seeing a lot of value out of it, as we've been saying. You know, and there have been some questions about cost as well. And I just wanted to, maybe I should just address that as well in this and say that, you know, obviously we're doing it across multiple countries. So maybe we can negotiate a bit of a bulk rate, but generally speaking, we're spending much less on lean data surveys than our external audits, right? So, you know, I mean, for an organization that says that when we've been saying that impact is our only bottom line, really it's more than worth the investment in making sure that we're being able to track what we're calling our one bottom line, because we spend a lot more on, you know, our financial measurement, our external audits and all of that, and this is a fraction of that cost. So yeah, we want to continue to do the lean data surveys annually in all of our countries. As we've said, this is part of a bigger set of you know, things that we're doing to manage social performance and listen to client voices and track impact data. But it's something we will continue to do, and we will continue to see how we can use this information to improve our product, services, and outreach over time.
That's fantastic. And Shamron, may I ask, how useful is the expansion of the comparison database that 60 Decibels is building for BRAC? So we've spoken a lot about how BRAC is looking at this internally and across your countries, the board point that Greg mentioned. How important is it for you to see a broader number of operators also embracing this approach, and for 60 Decibels to increase that database?
Yeah, extremely important, Laurie. So, you know, as the benchmark data gets, you know, bigger and, you know, we have, you know, more information to benchmark ourselves against, look at, you know, how we're doing versus others. It's not just about, you know, it's how we as an industry are doing better over time. So it's not just about BRAC doing better over time, but it's about the microfinance industry serving clients better over time. As I said at the beginning, part of the reason for this webinar and even the report that we're launching today is not just to say, look, we're doing some impactful work at BRAC, but, you know, if we can systematically, you know, track our impact information and we share it amongst ourselves, we as an industry can get better through these methodologies. And by having these open conversations about where we're falling behind, where our products are no longer contextual, how things are moving and how we need to move with them. And I think the more of our peers that do this kind of work, the better our conversations amongst ourselves will be, the better benchmarking data we'll have, and it's better for the industry overall. And so again, as I said at the beginning, I've worked on microfinance for a while as well, not as long as Greg perhaps, but you know, it was for most of us practitioners, just going through those years of, you know, microfinance is not impactful, and, you know, there aren't enough RCT results that show real impact. I mean, those of us who've been working on this, you know, a lot of that was crazy. I mean, we can see the impact, but now we have a way to track the impact and improve on it, and really incorporate that into our strategies and the way we you know, set our priorities and the things we you know, focus on in our annual plans, in our conversations with our affiliates. It's really changed the conversation, and the more we can do it as an industry, we all gain from that.
No, that's fantastic. Very well said. Thank you, Shamron Pai. And Sasha, do you want to say anything about that? What you see as the kind of motivation, the drive for more operators to be not just working directly with you, but being willing to share openly across the industry in the way that Shamron Pai just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely see that appetite. I mean, I think it is a walk before we run. And again, BRAC is exceptional in many ways, including the transparency of sharing all this data, including, the parts that are great and the parts that are, areas of improvement. So I think folks need to get there. And what we're trying to do is allow people to kind of walk before they run. So give as much benchmark comparison data as possible. And then over time, we're trying to do various things. For example, we know that there are lots of MFIs who have common investors. We're trying to figure out ways to allow that investor group to more formally share. We see it happening, obviously, informally, but make that a little bit more formal and kind of create larger circles of folks where the active sharing data is a little bit more common. And again, I mentioned this a little bit in passing, but the reason we're launching this financial inclusion index is to say, obviously, there's no perfect answer to, what does social impact mean at a client level for microfinance. However, we've done enough of these studies and we've talked to enough clients that we do a combination of what if clients say matters the most to them, what is boiled to the surface from the 150 to 200 microfinance organizations that we've already worked with, and to find that common set of measures and say, let's roll that out as a really boiled down survey that looks across 5 outcome themes. And is a very short 30-question survey. So our goal is, not just to do that because we'd like to get more data, but actually to do that as a formal and very public way to start to share those results. Again, not identifying individual MFIs, but to say, okay, across this metric, this is what the top performance looks like. This is what the middle looks like. This is what the bottom looks like. So anybody who's gathering that data, either with us or through partners, can really start to understand to this point, well, what does performance look like for this axis in this geography for us? And again, I think that what we've seen in other sectors that have managed to do this is that is the foundation upon which we build improvement. Everybody wants to do best. It's actually impossible to know how we're doing. Really, we know how our practices might compare, but we don't know how our outcomes might compare. And our hope is that if we can get more data out there, it gives everybody the tools to improve more aggressively.
I so appreciate how you framed all of that, Sasha. It was through that prism of learning, which is where we started our conversation today. Not judgment, but learning, improving what we're doing here. So thank you, that was terrific. And we're getting to the end of our time together, which I can't believe, it's really flown by. So I'd just like to go do a quick round robin, very quick, ask each of you if there's a call to action over the next 12 to 24 months for any one of our audience constituencies, whether it's investor, donor, operator, regulator, stakeholder. What would your call to action be? And naturally, I may kick off with you, if that's all right.
Yes, Laurie, my call to action is to all microfinance institutions, but also the donor community and the funder, because if there's something that this report is revealing once again, is that unfortunately there's still a lot of people living in poverty. And there's still the work of the microfinance is really relevant. It's even more relevant. If there were any doubt, I think this report also showed that. And it's the power of data, because as we say, data builds understanding, data builds alignments, data calls for action. So as much as we can collect data and show the needs, then we will be able to act. So
fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Data for action. Thank you very much. Fantastic. Greg, I'm going to turn to you.
Yeah, so maybe just a quick comment to say that, CGAP, we believe deeply in customer centricity. This is a way to put it into action and to make it real. The only other observation I'd make is that bear in mind that BRAC, is operating in multiple entities. And so this dashboard that we're getting is not only aligning investors and the board and management. If I'm a CEO in one of the operating entities, I'm comparing myself. How am I doing this year? Am I getting better next year? Am I beating my buddy over in country over there? I mean, I think there's probably a bit of that. And so in terms of just getting everybody pulling in the same direction on the same, I think it really results in meaningful change operationally on the ground. And I would strongly endorse this kind of thing in many other kinds of institutions beyond BRAC.
Thanks, Greg. It leads to meaningful action and a dialing up. Fantastic. Tara, over to you.
I think I'm going to borrow Natalie's points earlier. I think my call to action for all stakeholders would be to listen to learn, and if I could add to act and repeat. So it continues, it's iterative.
Yep.
And I think that particularly sitting as an investor, oftentimes it's easy to push that responsibility onto practitioners. And I think it needs to be a shared a shared piece of work for us to move forward.
Shared piece of work. I welcome that. Thank you, Tara. Sasha, to you.
Well, I think I shared some thoughts. I would suggest that there is, perfect enemy of the good risk here. I saw some comments, some questions that we didn't fully answer in terms of, how do we fully know about attribution? How do we know about, all these sorts of things? I think we need to continue to get there. We by no means think we've gotten to the end state and, this is the answer. However, I do think if you go back to, do we want to be more in dialogue with clients? Do we want in a systematic fashion to be asking them what their lived experiences looks like? And if we incorporate that data as a regular practice, will we improve? Will we get closer to those clients and serve them better? And I think we know it's a resounding yes to all of those questions. And that can continue to ladder up to, as we've all said, this is a complement to lots of other things. So we also need more formal studies. We also need to understand what our practices need to be. We need to do all of those things in concert. But the level of systematic conversation with and listening to clients relative to what it could be, I think there is a lot of ground to cover there. And so, let's allow ourselves to start, whether it's doing it yourselves, there's lots of public tools available, whether an organization like ours is part of that solution is much less the point.
Yes.
But getting that dialogue to happen in a systematic fashion, an objective fashion, in a comparable fashion, there's no choice but to improve when we start doing that, because again, you'll hear these voices, you hear these quotes, you'll hear what people are saying is going on, and there's no choice but to act on it then, and that's the
Here, systematic engagement and learn by doing and act. Don't wait for ex ante perfection. I think those are all really healthy reminders. Upoma and then Chairman Pai, just a closing word, and then I'll thank everyone. Upoma, over to you, please.
Yeah, thanks. No, I think most of it has been said, and I really like that action bit, because for us that is the most value. And in terms of learning, I would say, the call for action for me would be we don't want to say that we know everything from BRAC, because obviously we've been around almost 50 years, but by no means we know what is best already. So we would really welcome learning from other MFIs and really go, as Shaman Pai was saying before as well, there's a lot to gain from talking to each other and trying to move the industry toward more client centricity. So that would be my bit, Shaman Pai.
Thank you so much. And Chairman Pai, to you.
Thank you very much. Let me just take 30 seconds on behalf of BRAC just to thank all of the participants who joined this webinar, all the panelists for being with us today. I want to say thank you to GP, because GP actually introduced us to 60 decibels, and of course to 60 decibels for partnering with us on this. It's been a great journey. So. And lastly, a big thank you to my team. The team that's been leading this work over the last couple of years. I couldn't be more proud, and it's so great to see this report out. It's a really exciting day for me as well. Finally, call to action. I think before call to action, let me just say two things. One, we remain committed to gathering client voices and impact data and using it more and more in our work. And secondly, we remain committed to being transparent about our impact data and sharing it with the wider community. So that's our commitment, and the expectation or the call to action for me would be to most of our microfinance peers. So I would say to fellow microfinance practitioners, if you're doing this, let's figure out ways to do it more and use it in the way we operate. And to those who haven't done so much of it, I would really encourage you to track social performance more systematically, because it really helps. It helps to make sure that our work is impactful, but actually it also helps to make our microfinance entities more robust and better performing. So there are plenty of reasons to do this. Thank you, Lori.
Exactly. Thanks so much, Chairman Pai. And it just leaves to me to thank our panelists, our speakers today, and the audience for your participation and for your questions. One of the comments I made at the beginning is that I hope we would leave today, our session, collectively more determined to ensure that client experience, client voice, client priorities remain the guiding force for all that we do and how we do it, from strategy to operations to innovation to decision-making and beyond. And I think our speakers have really contributed to that. And so thank you all very much for your attendance. The full recording will be available, and we look forward to continuing the conversation as we go forth in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you all very much.